It began with a scream, short, sharp, almost swallowed by the night, but enough to make Daniel stop mid-stride. He had been walking home through the empty train station, mind drifting through the usual end-of-day fog, when that sound cracked the air. For a moment, he froze. It wasn't his business. It wasn't his problem. That's what he told himself as his pulse rose and his legs stiffened with a fear he didn't want to name. But something deeper tugged at him, a quiet pull he didn't understand. He moved toward the echoing voice. Daniel had never seen himself as a hero. In fact, most of his life was lived unnoticed, invisible even to himself. He worked, he went home, he kept to routine. People were unpredictable. People were exhausting. People were dangerous. That was the belief he had built his world around. Yet there he was, following the trembling sound of distress into a dim corridor behind the station's vending machines. A woman crouched on the floor, both hands pressed against her ankle as tears streaked down her cheeks. She wasn't being attacked, wasn't in immediate danger, just frightened, hurt, and alone. When she looked up at him, Daniel felt a shiver of recognition, fear laced with hope. The same expression he had once worn himself, years ago, when waiting for help that never came. Her voice wavered as she tried to stand. I'm okay. I just twisted it. Please, you don't have to. But he was already stepping forward. Let me help. The words left him before he could reconsider. Before he could retreat into the comfortable detachment he'd mastered. It startled them both. His hands trembled as he offered them to her, and she hesitated only a second before taking them. Her fingers were cold. Or maybe his were. He helped her to a nearby bench, his mind racing with questions he couldn't voice. Why did he care? Why did it matter? What force inside him overpowered the instinct to stay distant? As she breathed through the pain, he noticed details that anchored him, the frayed strap on her bag, the way she tried to apologize for being an inconvenience, the faint tremor in her voice. She kept insisting he didn't have to stay. But every time she said it, something inside him tightened, as if leaving would be a betrayal of a moral thread that had been dormant until now. A security guard eventually arrived, called by someone else who had heard the scream but hadn't come close. The woman thanked Daniel softly, eyes meeting his with a warmth he wasn't prepared for. You didn't walk away, she whispered. People usually walk away. The words hit him harder than he expected. He nodded, uncertain how to explain that for most of his life, he had walked away, not physically, but emotionally. From friends. From family. From the world. And perhaps from himself most of all. He left the station with an unsteady breath, feeling something in him shift. Helping her had taken almost nothing, minutes, maybe, but the echo of it lingered like ripples on still water. The next morning, he kept replaying the scene. Not the fear, not the scream, but the moment he reached out his hands. The moment he crossed the invisible line between indifference and care. Days passed, but the feeling remained. It lived under his ribs like a quiet truth. He found himself noticing things he used to ignore, the tired cashier forcing a smile, the elderly neighbor struggling with grocery bags, the coworker whose mask slipped just enough to reveal exhaustion. Daniel began to understand something he had never articulated, that people weren't puzzles to solve or threats to avoid. They were mirrors. Their pain reflected pieces of his own, and their relief awakened something that had been long asleep. One evening, sitting alone in his apartment, he caught his reflection in the darkened window. For the first time in years, he didn't see a ghost moving through life. He saw someone capable of shaping the world in small, human ways. Someone who mattered. The realization struck him with both gentleness and force. We help others not because we're saints or because we want praise. We help because somewhere deep inside, we recognize ourselves in another person's trembling voice, in their fear, in their hope. We help because it reminds us we are part of something larger than the small, isolated stories we tell ourselves. We help because connection, real, raw, human connection, makes existence feel less like survival and more like living. Daniel didn't become a savior after that night. He didn't suddenly change the world. But he changed his world. And that was enough. Every act of kindness, no matter how quiet, drew him further out of the shadows he had lived in for so long. He learned that empathy isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as not walking away. And in that truth, he found a new version of himself, one he had unknowingly been waiting to meet. At the core of every human heart lies a quiet instinct to reach toward another, even when fear fights to pull us back. Prosocial behavior isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's the courage to pause, to notice, to care. And every time we choose compassion over distance, we rewrite not just someone else's moment, but a part of our own story too.